The Moviegoer by Walker Percy, as written on the back cover here, winner of the 1962 National Book Award and named one of Time's 100 Best English Language Novels. One or both of those accolades I might have to contest myself, but Walker Percy, if you did not know, was an author in the 20th century from the southern United States. He was actually trained, I believe, as a physician and also was kind of a dabbler in philosophy, not unlike myself, I suppose, in that regard. But this book, The Moviegoer, was his debut novel. And despite its kind of inauspicious genesis, it was, as I read, awarded the 1962 National Book Award, which kind of catapulted Percy not only into the ranks of America's most preeminent writers, but to the very vanguard of Southern writers. Now, this is a book that I will say up front is in no way, shape, or form a bad book. It is actually a very well done book with evident and consummate craftsmanship and skill. But it is a book that I myself, for personal reasons, didn't really like all that much. But as per usual, I will attempt to separate the subjective from the objective in my review. So, what is the story of The Moviegoer? Well, it takes place in, I think it's the late 1950s or early 1960s, roughly contemporaneously with the time that the book was written. It takes place in, like I said, the late 1950s or 60s New Orleans. And our narrator is one Binks Bowling. He is a pretty prosperous young stockbroker and Korean War veteran who kind of just drifts through life without much meaning or purpose to his existence. Now, as I said, Walker Percy was a dabbler in philosophy, and this book is um, basically an existentialist novel. In fact, it opens with an epigraph from Kierkegaard. And to summarize the plot of it is not that difficult because there really isn't much in the way of a plot. Basically, Binks Bowling, our narrator and protagonist, just kind of aimlessly shuffles through his own story. There really is no plot to speak of. He has a cousin named Kate who is mentally ill. Um, and he also, as the title would suggest, he goes to the movies a lot because it's in film that he kind of loses himself for a time, perhaps, in kind of just it kind of escapism, you might say, trying to not have to think about his empty, hollow life that doesn't really have a specific drive or purpose to it. And just a lot of day-to-day mundanity happens. But then at the end, he ends up marrying Kate, his cousin. That's right, he marries his own cousin. This is definitely a Dixieland book for sure with that. So he marries his own cousin and then stops being a stockbroker and enrolls in medical school. Kind of a reflection, I suppose, of the author himself in that regard. And that's the book. That is pretty much all there is in the way of plot with The Moviegoer. So let's just talk about how well the book comes off. And it comes off quite well. Once again, objectively, this is a superb book. The writing in this book is good. Walker Percy, even though I believe, as it says here on the back cover as well, its author was 44 years old when The Moviegoer was published. And despite kind of getting a late start in the writing game, it is clear that Walker Percy did have a knack for it. This book is a finely written book. There's some nice turns of phrase here. The narrative voice feels very confident and assured. It's probably one of the better debut novels you might actually read because it does not really feel like a debut. It feels very assured. in its execution. It feels like it comes off very well, and it really does. Again, the writing is good, no real complaints. The characters, Binks Bowling is the narrator in this, and so he is our POV character, needless to say, and he is understandable and he's pretty well developed, I think. Um, but he's perhaps not the most likable. I didn't really like him all that much. He's just kind of uninspired, you might say. He has no real drive or meaning to his life, and that's the purpose of the book. Is again, it's an existentialist work of fiction about the character trying to search out some kind of grand meaning and purpose to his existence. The meaning of life, you might say, trying to find value in different things or create value of his own. So that's, the characters work. Kate, his cousin and eventual wife, is also a pretty good character, I think. She is mentally ill, and she gets quite a bit of page time in this, and I think we understand her as well, and also his aunt. The characters in this are by and large pretty good, so no real complaints there. And as I said, the story is very loose, not really the most plot-driven affair. So overall, don't really have much to complain about with the book objectively. But now, as for my subjective reaction to the book, I didn't really like the moviegoer all that much. For one, it's very preoccupied with existential malaise of kind of this character that's just shuffling through his own story, again, in a very uninspired fashion, searching for meaning and purpose and what have you. And, it's, that can definitely make for some good fiction, but it just kind of fell flat for me because I just didn't really connect personally all that well with Binks. In fact, I found the ending of this book is what I disliked the most, because by the ending of this book, I viewed him as a very weak and kind of contemptible character, because in my view, he just sort of gives up. And I get that people might take that differently and see him performing a kind of selfless act in marrying his cousin who is mentally ill, basically just to take care of her, basically, and, help her avoid the pitfalls of suicidal ideation, you might say. And then he stops in his career as a stockbroker, which he makes clear in the book he was excelling at in making serious bank with. But he enrolls in medical school just because that's what his aunt wants him to do. And I just viewed that as giving up. Like, he doesn't, this is not a very triumphant book. In fact, I don't even know that you can say that Binks has a character arc in the conventional sense. He doesn't really change or evolve by the end of this, or it didn't seem so to me. If anything, he devolves, I think, because again, he just gives up. And I just viewed him as kind of, again, a weak and kind of contemptible character because his ego is so feeble and underdeveloped, I should say, that he basically just changes the entire course of his very life just to please the people around him, which I just view as pathetic and kind of, again, just kind of something of a defeat. He just gives up and he's like, I'll just marry my cousin and go be a doctor because, that's what other people want, I guess. I didn't like the ending to this. It felt like a defeat and like the character just gives up, and just stops his search for meaning and just kind of settles into, basically just other people's designs, I guess. Didn't like it, and I didn't like Binks's character because of that, because again, it just feels weak and kind of pathetic to me. But also, I do think that there should have been more explicated as regards his service in the Korean War, because he was injured in the book, but that doesn't really have much bearing on the story. and it's barely even mentioned. And I think there could have been some more material gotten from that direction, I should say. But really, I just found this book boring. It's not something that I really responded to particularly well. But again, it is by no means, it is in no way, shape, or form a bad book. In fact, it's a very good book. It's just one that I just really couldn't get into. I just found it meandering, boring. And again, the main character I just kind of didn't really like all that much by the end. But anyway, to rate The Moviegoer, I'm going to give this book objectively an A. Yeah, objectively it gets an A. It is a fine book, one that is again rendered with consummate skill and craftsmanship and in a quite assured manner by a writer who truly had a knack for the craft. But again, it's just not really my cup of tea at the end of the day. But the reason why I said at the outset that I might have to contest one or both of the accolades that this book received, that is the National Book Award and being named one of Time Magazine's 100 best English language novels, um, is because the competition, at least for the National Book Award, was better, I think, than this book. Now, Time Magazine, it can name this book one of its 100 best books. I personally don't think it deserves that. It's not bad. Once again, it's a very good book, but I don't think it's quite as deep or profound as it really wants to be. And it's just kind of tedious, I found it. But Time can name it one of its 100 best books. But I'm here to tell you that it did not deserve that National Book Award because it was up against Catch 22 by Joseph Heller. And yes, Catch 22 is the book that deserved the National Book Award that year. It mentions in the afterword here that it was up against that book as well as J.D. Salinger's Franny and Zoe. I haven't read that book, but maybe that, but really, really, it should have been Catch 22. There is no reason why this should have beat out Catch 22 for that National Book Award. So, yes, I will contest. This book won the National Book Award, but unjustly so, and I think it should have gone to Joseph Heller. But once again, fine book, good book, perhaps even great book, maybe depending on your taste, but not really so much in my taste. Just not something that I really responded to. But I can appreciate the skill with which it was executed. So objectively, it's an A-level book, just not something that I am really that much into myself. But anyway, The Moviegoer by Walker Percy. Have you read The Moviegoer? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said about it here today. And if you haven't read The Moviegoer, if you're into existentialism, which I myself, I suppose, aren't really, you might like this. If you like very plotless books in which very little happens and it's kind of just a character walking around remarking on the um, mundanity of life and kind of bemoaning his lack of purpose or direction, you might like this. But if you don't, if that doesn't sound like something you would enjoy, then I would say you might not want to read this book. Unless you just want to read it because of the prestige that it has, in which it advertises on its back cover. But as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.